They fired him. They humiliated him. Years later, he bought the company. They laughed when he asked for a job. They ignored him when he worked harder than everyone else, and the day they fired him, they made sure he would never forget the humiliation. What they didn't know was simple. Humiliation doesn't destroy a man. It trains him. This is not a story about luck. It is a story about patience, memory, and quiet determination. Daniel Carter used to wake up before the city came alive. Before the noise, before the rush, before people put on their confident faces, he was already awake, staring at a cracked ceiling in a small room he shared with his worries. Life had taught him discipline early, but it had never rewarded him for it. Every morning, he washed his face with cold water, ironed the same shirt, cleaned the same worn shoes, and carefully placed his resume into a thin folder. That folder carried years of effort and months of rejection. Still, he carried it like it mattered. He walked across the city asking for work, office after office, door after door. The answers never changed. "We'll call you." "You don't fit the profile." "The position is already filled." The phone never rang. Hunger became familiar. Hope became expensive. People passed him without seeing him. Friends slowly disappeared. Even silence at home felt heavy. But Daniel never complained. Something inside him refused to break. One afternoon, exhausted and distracted, he noticed a small sign on an old wall. Hiring. Immediate position available. No details, no promises, just a chance. The building was old. The interviewer uninterested. "Long hours, no recognition. Low pay," the man said. "Are you sure you want this?" Daniel paused, thinking of every rejection he had swallowed. "I don't need easy," he answered. "I need a chance." They hired him that day, not because they believed in him, but because desperation is cheap. As he walked home, Daniel didn't feel successful. He felt ready. He didn't know it yet, but this job would take everything from him and quietly prepare him for everything that was coming. Daniel's first weeks on the job revealed a truth life had long whispered. Effort alone does not earn respect, and diligence is often invisible to those who thrive on shortcuts. He arrived before sunrise, when the hallways were still silent, and stayed long after everyone else had left, ensuring every detail was perfect. He learned systems no one explained, fixed problems no one wanted to touch, and completed tasks that had been ignored for months. He carried the weight of invisible labor, believing that time and consistency would eventually be noticed. But notice never came. Some co-workers glanced at him with quiet disdain, as though his presence threatened their comfort. Supervisors spoke only when necessary, their eyes avoiding him, their voices dripping impatience. Daniel understood quickly. In this company, visibility and favoritism outweighed effort and results. He had walked into a place where merit was irrelevant, and where mistakes, real or imagined, were a weapon used against those without connections. One day, a minor clerical error appeared in a report. Daniel recognized immediately that it wasn't his fault. He tried to explain, but before he could speak, he was summoned to the center of the office in front of dozens of colleagues. The manager's voice cut through the room like steel, sharp, deliberate, and humiliating. Words flew, accusations louder than facts, judgment louder than reason. "This is unacceptable," the manager said. "You've failed us. Standards exist for a reason, and you have not met them." Laughter, quiet but unmistakable, rippled through the room. It wasn't cruel, at least not by intention, but it confirmed something Daniel already suspected. He was replaceable. No investigation, no opportunity to explain, no defense, only public shaming. After the meeting, Daniel was escorted to gather his belongings. His desk, which had once been an empty space to him, now felt like a monument to the work no one acknowledged. Outside, the world was indifferent, as always. Passers-by did not see him. They only saw a man leaving a building carrying a box. He walked home slowly, letting each step imprint the scene into his memory. He memorized every face, every tone, every laugh. Anger did not consume him. Anger was too predictable. Shame did not follow. He had been too familiar with it. Instead, a strange clarity settled in. Humiliation is temporary, but lessons are permanent. Over the following days, Daniel reflected on everything the company had shown him. He realized that success in that environment wasn't about talent or effort. It was about strategy, influence, and knowing when to be visible and when to be silent. Every slight, every dismissal, every oversight became a lesson in observation. He studied his co-workers, the supervisors, and the unspoken rules of the office, as if the humiliation itself were a teacher he could not afford to ignore. He took small jobs to survive, cleaning offices, running errands, selling goods at odd hours. It was not the career he had dreamed of, but it was the training ground for patience, resilience, and planning. Daniel learned to move without being seen, to speak without being heard, to endure without complaint. And through it all, the fire never died. The quiet determination in him only grew stronger. The faces of those who laughed, who doubted, who humiliated him were etched into his mind. Not for revenge, but for strategy. Every memory became a step toward preparation. Every insult became a reminder that the man who survives public humiliation learns more about power than the one who is celebrated too soon. By the end of that year, Daniel had changed, not just in skill, but in mindset. He had become patient, calculating, and deliberate. He understood the rules of the world around him, the subtle dynamics of influence and authority. And though he still worked low-paying jobs, each day he kept building something invisible: knowledge, insight, and a quiet plan that would one day reshape the very people who thought they had destroyed him. Humiliation had been cruel, but it had been thorough. And thorough lessons, Daniel realized, are the ones no one forgets. Daniel had survived the humiliation, but survival alone was not enough. Each day he woke with a quiet purpose, a single thought repeating in his mind: I will not be powerless again. The jobs he took, cleaning offices, running errands, doing tasks that seemed beneath him, were not failures. They were classrooms. Every moment of hardship became a lesson in patience, observation, and resilience. He studied people, not just how they acted when life was easy, but how they acted when stakes were high, when small errors were magnified, when ambition collided with fear. Daniel noticed patterns: the way a manager's smile hid impatience, the subtle favoritism that protected incompetence, the way colleagues whispered behind closed doors, betraying alliances no one could see. Each observation became a tool, each lesson a weapon he would wield one day. At night, he sat alone in his small apartment, reviewing mental notes. He planned quietly, not recklessly, not vindictively, but meticulously. He began sketching ideas in his mind: how a company should be run, how employees should be treated, how mistakes could be transformed into opportunities rather than instruments of humiliation. He imagined a world where people like him, people who worked silently, diligently, and without privilege, could rise. Then came the rumor, a whisper he caught from a friend. The company that had fired him, the very one that had humiliated him, was struggling. Poor decisions, overconfidence, mismanaged finances, they were teetering on the edge. For the first time in years, Daniel felt a flicker of opportunity. Not revenge, not yet, but a chance to change the narrative. He did not act immediately. Instead, he watched. He observed the market. He studied the company's financial moves, its public statements, and its executive shifts. Slowly, quietly, the picture became clear. The company's collapse was avoidable, but only by someone who understood its weaknesses, and Daniel understood them better than anyone. Months passed. Daniel continued his modest jobs, still living simply, still unnoticed by the world. But inside him, a transformation was taking place. The humiliation he had endured had sharpened his mind. The countless hours of observation had trained his patience, and the loneliness he had endured had strengthened his focus. He was no longer a man reacting to the world. He was preparing to lead it. When the opportunity finally presented itself, a chance to purchase the struggling company outright, Daniel was ready, not because he had wealth, but because he had strategy. He had allies he had quietly cultivated, investors who saw potential where others saw risk, and knowledge no one else possessed. The day he signed the papers, Daniel remembered every sneer, every dismissive glance, every word meant to diminish him. He remembered the feeling of being powerless, invisible, and disposable. But he did not feel revenge. He felt clarity. He had turned humiliation into education. He had transformed despair into action. And as he walked into the company for the first time as its owner, he realized something profound. Power is not given. It is taken by those who have prepared for it. And respect, true respect, is not demanded. It is earned quietly, deliberately, over time. Daniel was no longer the man who had been dismissed, ignored, and ridiculed. He was a man who had learned, who had waited, and who had emerged ready to reshape the world around him. The company that had once humiliated him would now be guided by the very principles it had failed to recognize: fairness, diligence, and respect for those who worked silently but tirelessly. Humiliation had been his teacher. Patience had been his armor, and determination had been his key. In the quietest of moments, Daniel smiled. The long years of struggle were not wasted. They had been the crucible that forged a leader the world could no longer ignore. The morning Daniel walked into the company as its new owner, the air felt different. He wasn't just another employee trying to survive anymore. He held the papers, the authority, and the responsibility to change everything. The familiar offices, once cold and indifferent, now seemed to recognize his presence in a new way, hesitant, almost fearful. Every face he passed carried a story, some of surprise, some of disbelief, and a few subtle smirks from those who had once underestimated him. Daniel didn't smile. Not yet. He felt the weight of every moment that had brought him here. The silent mornings of observation, the countless rejections, the public humiliation that had shaped him. His first meeting with the executives was tense. They were used to power, influence, and control, but now the balance had shifted. Daniel spoke calmly, deliberately, not with arrogance, but with clarity. "I'm not here to punish anyone," he said. "I'm here to build something better. To respect those who work hard, to correct what has been neglected, and to listen." He spent hours walking through departments, observing quietly. He asked questions. He noticed inefficiencies no one else had seen. He smiled at employees who had been overlooked, offering recognition where none had existed before. Slowly, a subtle change began. People started paying attention, not out of fear, but curiosity and respect. Daniel's approach was deliberate. He knew that transformation wasn't about grand gestures. It was about small, consistent actions that reminded everyone this company was no longer the same. The lessons of his past, humiliation, struggle, and patience, guided every decision. Every policy he implemented, every encouragement he offered, was designed to ensure no one would feel powerless the way he once had. By the end of his first week, whispers had begun. The man they had once dismissed, laughed at, and humiliated had returned, not as a victim, but as a leader. Daniel knew the path ahead would not be easy. Change is uncomfortable. Resistance is inevitable. But for the first time, he felt that his long years of struggle, patience, and planning were paying off. The company and the people in it were listening. Humiliation had taught him resilience. Observation had taught him strategy. And now, Daniel's determination was teaching them that respect, leadership, and fairness could transform even the most broken spaces.